Hello everybody, thank you for joining the Great Dynamics podcast. My name is Ahmed Hassan, and today with me is Esther Atwell. Esther spent over a decade at the CIA, first as a linguist and after that as a collection management officer. Her knack for languages, mainly Mandarin and Cantonese, have also helped her as a professional tutor and a diplomat. She today works in real estate and is a court interpreter on the island of Hawaii. Esther, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Ahmed. It's so nice to meet you.
Same. I know we tried to do this before and I kind of messed up my timing, so apologies for that. And because I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time and finally we've been able to do this, I think even this is the last episode in the season. So thank you again for making the time to...
No problem. I am so honored to be on your last episode. And don't worry about the last time because time zone differences really is... can make things confusing.
Yeah, indeed. So Esther, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up and what was your life like and how you ended up with intelligence, basically.
Okay. So I was born in Hong Kong and lived there with my family till I was 11 when we immigrated to the U.S. And then I had gone through school and everything and have a knack for languages, I think. So when I was in high school, I went to a special science and technology high school, which is where I met my husband. We didn't date each other in high school, but it was a special school, so we were a bit nerdy, all of us. And they offered really cool languages that you can take. And so I took 3 or 4 years of Russian studies. So that was the language that I chose because I thought, I can do Chinese, so maybe Russian because, it's Cold War time. I just fell in love with the language, thought it sounded so beautiful. But I took 1 semester of it in college and I went to Duke when we won the back-to-back national championships for basketball. So that was, so I spent a lot of time, socializing with friends. And then I ended up I did want to improve my Chinese, so I took 1 semester of Chinese, wanting to get into the basic class so I could get my pronunciation correct, because I grew up in Hong Kong and spoke Cantonese, but I sat in a Chinese church for about 10 years where the pastor was from Taiwan and everything's interpreted, so I started picking up the language. Plus, I was living near grandparents, so they would watch Chinese shows with subtitles, and I would watch along. So I knew Mandarin, I knew I was not going to be able to speak it with a proper accent. So I wanted to take the class, but they ended up putting me in the highest level because I could read I could read very well. So I ended up kind of with this kind of mismatched, class where, I can read the stuff and I can talk to you about it, but I just want to learn the basics, how to pronounce things correctly so I don't sound like a Cantonese person speaking Mandarin. Because if you do language studies, people say, that's one of the most horrible things to have to listen to. But I picked it up and started doing actually interpretation at church. And that was funny because nobody at church, except for maybe the pastor or maybe the really old people, knew that I could understand the language at all. Because I only spoke to the really old folks, who couldn't speak,
that's how to learn.
Speak English. Yeah. And so I did interpretation for them after graduation. And I majored in psychology and got a certificate in marketing and management when I was at Duke, thinking I was going to business. And I actually did do some insurance sales. And I tried to start a nonprofit with my friend who wanted to do some kind of a cognitive behavioral change by making videos for prisoners so that they can know, there are other ways to live life, aside from just what, it's more like problem solving type skills to help them with that, stealing or doing something bad, maybe not your first choice, maybe not choose that as your first option. So it was something that was based on some Canadian prison studies that we were trying to go after. But that was a nonprofit that we were trying to do, and I only saved like 6 months worth of funds to make it happen. So that's like lesson learned, like some projects, like your passion projects, so maybe need to like save more funds. But I was young and just wanted to do something positive, right? And then so like when I was doing insurance, actually, it was medical and life insurance. And I felt like I was helping people. I was turning in business every week. And I really, at first, enjoyed the people I worked with, but then they brought in some kind of greedy managers from the big cities. So I decided I don't want to work for these people because I just thought they were not really helping me grow as a person. They were just trying to take. When we have a big deal, they try to say, oh, you don't know how to do the close yet, so we'll help you close. It's like, I'm closing business every week, so no, you don't need to come with me. And around that time, a family friend reached out to ask for help for his daughter because she was having trouble with math. And so I started tutoring her and discovered that I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed seeing her grow and be more confident. And it's kind of like a lot of times these high schoolers, they just need to get through one little hurdle because a lot of it's psychological, right? Because it's like, oh, I'm doing fine. I'm a smart person. It's all good. And then they start getting a couple bad grades on tests because there's one concept they don't understand, right? Then they start to feel like, oh, I'm stupid, or, oh, I am, not going to be able to do this. And then I think that messes with the head. And so it's really gratifying for me when I help these kids, these students, be able to kind of regain their confidence, not just understand the material, but regain their confidence. And some students require a little bit longer term assistance, but usually I just work with them until they get through the hurdle. They feel like they're okay. Then I let them go and they could come back and get more help later if they need it. Because for me, it wasn't about just, making the money. It was really about like being able to help that person. It's just so amazing to me that I felt honored to be allowed to help them do this, and the kids started referring me to each other. And so I had a pretty robust tutoring business and I learned a lot from them as well. I had a student who was blind and legally blind, and I worked with him for 2 years, and like one of the smartest people I've ever known. And I just admired him so much, like all the effort and his sense of humor. It's not fun being a teenager when you're different, when you're different from other kids, it's not fun being a teenager, but he had a great sense of humor and I always appreciated that. And he's from the Middle East and he was Muslim. So that was when I learned from him about Ramadan and fasting and all the stuff. And I just thought, I just remember telling him, okay, if you don't feel good, you got to go lay down at the nurse's place. Don't pass out at school. So the whole experience was really edifying. And then I did that. And John and I had gotten married and he wanted to apply for a position overseas. And I thought, well, I married you. Maybe I can, give you 3 years of my life, right? Overseas for you to do what you want. And so that's how it started. So we went to our first assignment and our first child fell in our lap. So I don't know if John told you we adopted our first child.
No, he didn't know.
Yeah,
no, he didn't.
We adopted our first child. And I met her like the first week I was in country. And I had no intention of adopting because we had just gotten married for 2 years. We were just trying to make sure we didn't kill each other, so could get along, right? So she came along and I had always thought that, so this was a first assignment. I got to do a lot of research and on where we were going to live, and there was an AIDS orphanage. And I thought, and this was in 1997, and there was a lot of stigma back then around AIDS and HIV. And I just thought, these kids, like, I'm not exchanging bodily fluids with them. It's okay. They deserve to be held and have, feel loved, and, however long their little lives might be. So I had wanted to find out where this place was. And one day a lady at when I first got there, one of the ladies at the consulate asked me if I want to go play with babies. I was like, okay, yeah. And then when I was walking in, this lady who ran the orphanage said, I got a baby who looks just like you. You got to meet her. So that's how we got our first child. And then I got pregnant like 2 weeks after she started living with us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because it was all like unplanned. It's as if we skipped biology class. No, just kidding. I'm just kidding. But so she started, and then I could see how it was, like when you're in the overseas lifestyle, it can be like a fishbowl, can be a big pressure cooker for families. So I could see how families that have issues, they implode very quickly in spectacular ways. And families who are strong, they are actually like, they just thrive, and I wanted that. And so when he decided, I want to switch from one career track to another that would allow us to do more overseas time, I could see, that could be really good for our family, because we were surviving a tough post for marriages. And not only that, it's like we could, I could see how being in a developing country that is poor really like helps the kids appreciate what they have. They were and are a lot less materialistic than their peers. There's like, I've never had one instance where a kid was fussing because they think, I need to have this latest toy, I'm going to die, right? That's never happened with any of our kids. So when we were in this overseas tour, there was a need for language help. And that's how I started my career in the CIA. It's because I feel that need, and I thought, this is something I can do to help. And it took a while, because the application process always takes a while. But I started working as a language officer. But meanwhile, while I was waiting, I also worked I was a commissioned consular officer. So I was working on the visa line to adjudicate visas as well in another post, in the second post we went to. So until the CIA job came through. And I started as a language officer with, of course, Chinese language from 2001. And I worked at the agency until 2014. So when I entered as a linguist, it was it was kind of, because I was overseas, right? So I didn't have a lot of resources available to me. So that was a little bit hard. But there were people in my time zone that I became friends with, other linguists that I was in the same time zone with, that could help me with certain things. And then when we went back to headquarters was where I saw like, I kind of think that I could do well in ops type setting, because I'm more of an extrovert. So when John and I go to functions, we would socialize with other people, and then he'll tell me, okay, go find me these people. And I help him remember names, he's like, okay, find out about this person. I was like, okay, I'll do it. Just as normal spousal things, right? So I thought I was really interested in the ops world, just because I thought it's kind of like if you're in a company that sells something, right? The salesperson, they're the core people, right? So for me, I felt like this is the CIA operations, that's kind of like the core. And if I have those aptitude, I would like to be part of that. Right? It's more responsibility. As a language officer, you do have responsibility too. You have to be like very accurate in what you're doing. You have to like really keep learning all the time, different terminologies and different issues that might pop up, so that you can give the best and most accurate translation possible or interpretation possible when you're in meetings with people, because that matters. That could lead to some life and death decisions, like somewhere down the line, right? But it can also be a little bit tedious work because you're just sitting there staring all the time, not talking to anyone. And since I'm more of an extrovert, I thought, so I asked my boss about that, and they gave me an opportunity. I had to pay my dues. There were other jobs I had to do that was totally unglamorous but necessary, and I did it for a year to pay my dues, and then they recommended me to take the operations, the field tradecraft course, so that I could be operationally certified. And that one was challenging, but in a good way. Like, it really put me out of my comfort zone and helped me learn like really cool, neat things about myself. There are like a lot of things I didn't think I could do, and turned out to be, it's like, okay, I can do this, so that was very gratifying. And you feel like you're able to go help and, help protect our country, protect national security and protect the people you work with. And so I felt like that was very valuable. And then, and then getting to do some cool things for the country. And then later becoming a manager, being able to actually, even before I became a manager, I was given opportunities to mentor other junior officers, which I really enjoyed. I kind of like bringing up the next generation. And I also enjoy being mentored by other people who, because there's some different mentorship opportunities in the agency that I took advantage of. And it was really great to learn from other people who had been there before me, because as a woman in the CIA, it's a different path. It can be a different path, than my male colleagues. Yeah. And just, you deal with the usual issues, especially since I was a mom. I was a mother of 4 kids. And so with a husband who could, say, oh, hey, honey, I'm going to go away for a trip, see you in a week, or I don't know how long. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, you got to, so I got used to managing everything like in the household on my own. But I had help always along the way. When we lived overseas, we had helpers that we hired, like nannies, drivers, and stuff. So that helped. And then when we were back stateside for a while, we lived near my parents, so they helped. And then as the kids got older, they were quite independent, and so that was more. Then it became more of a, hey, gotta, figure out carpools. Like, if I can't be there, I got to make sure, I connect with other moms, So that's something that I think, unless you're a single dad, you don't really have to worry about that, in terms of the ops. It's really like the work life. I don't even want to say balance, but it's the work life priorities, because you're never balanced. Because at any time, one's always pulling you. Different times of life, one would have a stronger pull for you than the other.
Absolutely. And when you went from a language officer to an ops officer, were you then already back stateside? Because how then? Which you trained back stateside, or was this you were trained abroad?
Yeah, actually, I was an operationally certified collection management officer. So it's a little bit different from what John did in his career, because like for him, he was an ops officer. People probably have a little bit more understanding about that line of work, because they meet with assets, they recruit agents, the whole like intelligence cycles. For me, as a collection management officer, what I do is I assess the information. So I was trained so I could go handle assets. I could do everything that the ops officer does. However, my role is more of a like the next level for raw intelligence. So what the ops officer collects out there, it's raw intelligence, right? So so they bring it back, and I am evaluating it with the help of analysts and other resources to see, hey, this is how reliable is this information? And then, so it's kind of like if you think of the intelligence cycle as a wheel, the collection management officer is actually kind of in the middle of it, because we get feedback and then we, send out more requirements out to the field, and they give us the information, we evaluate it again. And then on the finished intelligence side, we're the ones who know the cases, know the information. So we actually sit in on meetings when analysts or senior intelligence officers who are analysts, they write something like, for example, the national intelligence estimates. So these are going out to the public or up to like Congress or other consumers that normally don't have all the clearances we do, right? So we got to make sure that however they use, that is called finished intelligence, what these senior analysts and are putting out. And so we make sure that the information is used accurately and that our sources and methods are protected. So we would sit in on meetings to like make sure that happens, so we see the other side of it. We also work with partners, the 5i partners, to coordinate with each other.
Can you say then that your role was also to advocate for the operations officer, make sure that the intelligence or the information that they received is used correctly or interpreted correctly in that sense by analysts?
Yeah, because sometimes because everyone has different levels of writing skills, right? Some people write really clearly, really well. So I would be like the first threshold, like, okay, you bring this to me. If I have questions, then I'm when I'm reading it, I have questions, then I can go back to the officer and say, hey, what do you mean by this, right? Can you tell me exactly what they said, right? And so then we can, because sometimes people get tired, they skip a sentence, or they think they wrote something down, but they didn't.
They're under pressure.
Yeah. And so I think so this collection management officer would be like pretty much the first set of eyes on the information after it's collected. And so, we do like make sure that things are set out in an understandable way. And, sometimes folks, like if you talk things out, they come up with the right answer on their own. Yeah.
I hear you. It's interesting because I'm gonna snip this bit of you explaining the role, because I don't know if you're aware of this, but we built an intelligence course that's designed around the intelligence cycle. And one of the hardest parts of the cycle to explain is the direction and the collection management, because that's not a role that I did. I do it now on the private side, but it's not something I'm formally trained to do. So it was interesting to see how the differences happen, because obviously every country is also different. But I'm definitely going to use your explanation to add as an extra bit of information for the people taking the courses. Sorry, please go ahead.
Oh. I actually did this segment. I did a segment on intelligence collection cycle when John was teaching a class at the local community college for the intelligence operations and management class that he had taught at the local community college here. Yeah.
What I find very interesting, two things that come up. I don't think we really discuss it often in this podcast, but to me it's very important. But is one red thread I can see through your life and your career is the need to always the need to help and to help others. Is that something that played a role in the decision to join the CIA? And also, is that necessary for somebody that wants to like serve their country in whatever way, actually?
Yeah, I would think that. Well, I think it's part of my personality makeup, the need to help. I was a psych major, so we took like personality tests, and I just, and a lot of times it doesn't matter what the job is. The most gratifying part of it was helping people. even when I was doing volunteer work, even when I was, just being in the food service part of it, just that was the best part. And it continues to be. I've turned into a real estate agent now. And that's the best part for me, is to be able to help other people. And I also still use my language skills. I'm a court certified interpreter. And so for me, it's like, I look at it more as a community service, because I don't want anyone to be lost in some legal proceeding because they don't understand the language, right? Or they don't understand what's happening to them. That's not what our country is about, right? We're supposed to give equal opportunity to everyone, right? You can't have equal opportunity if people don't understand why they're being denied benefits, or if they're being like arrested for something, right? They need to be able to understand that. And so, yeah, I think that in terms of having a career in the intelligence field, it helps to understand the big picture of what you're doing. Like, every single one of us is a cog in the wheel that can be easily replaced. That's the reality. Because, like we used to say, like, okay, well, you devote so much time to this thing, but when you die, who's coming to your funeral, right? It's work going to mourn for you, right? No, you'll be replaced the next day by somebody else filling into your position. However, what do you get out of it? Are you helping the mission? Are you helping move things forward? If you have this talent or ability, right, that God gave you, and you don't use it for the good, right? That's a waste, right? And I do believe in serving one's country. I grew up in a colony. There's no really concept of this country thing, right? Because I was in a colony, and then the immigration to America, it has its flaws, but there are a lot of good things and good people and good ideas in it, and to be able to play a part in protecting the country, it's like, speaks to me. And I think for somebody who is wanting to do a career in that, you have to care, because you're dealing with people all the time. This is like human intelligence. So you're dealing with people. And if you don't care, then like,
you won't be doing it for long.
Yeah, like you won't be doing it for long, because it's like, is it the money? Is it the excitement? It's like, okay, well, our bodies deteriorate, right? When you're in your early days, you can, in your 20s, 30s, you can like go walk the streets, without breaking a sweat, when you're, and do all these exciting physical things. And then, when you're in 50s, you're like, okay, your eyesight's already going, like everything's blurry, right? So what does it mean for you, right? Then there's a transition, right? Because you're doing the cool, exciting things, but when you can't do it anymore, if you do care about the mission, if you do care about the people, it's very easy to change roles and become the teacher, or become, the mentor, because you are still contributing, right? And then your experience, people can run ideas by you, and you can still because you have that knowledge and you have that experience, you can contribute positively.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And something interesting that you I'm still on the second part of the question that I wanted to ask, but sometimes I think in some cases it turns people a little bit off, but I think it's an important thing. But you talked a lot about the role of faith, and how did that play a role in your time and the decisions that you take?
Well, yeah, like you never know what's going to happen, right? So every time I know I'm doing something that, if things go wrong, it could go really wrong. I always pray, like before every op, like, even if in training scenario, I know I've got to get through this, because I cannot, I won't pass the class if I screw up. So I always pray, because you can plan everything, but I don't know if inciting Murphy's Law would resonate with your audience or not, but you can have the best plan in the world. You can even have plan A, plan B, plan C. Something unexpected can always happen. And then how do you react? Then you got to rely on your training, right? And also, not just training, you need a bit of luck. And some people, I think that's from God. And yeah, there are things that I definitely don't do because, my faith, or that I do because of my faith. Well, it both happens. So having a career is important to me because that's just the way I'm wired. Some women are very happy staying at home. For me personally, I need a sense of accomplishment to be happy. And however, I will not abandon my children because, so there's a balance, whereas some women who came before me, and I'm hoping that things are different nowadays for women, but there were a lot of people who came before me where I saw the ladies stay single, they never get married, because they feel like they can't pursue the career and they could choose only one or the other, right? And then there were some senior people that tried to mentor us where they're married, they have kids, but it's the nannies who are raising the kids, not them. And that's not the model I wanted either. So there are trade-offs for every decision you make, there are trade-offs. And so it's really about your priorities. And so my faith helped me like very easily figure out what my priorities are. And sometimes you feel like, oh, you lost out on an opportunity, but you know what? God opens doors and others will always come through. And sometimes there are opportunities that seem like they're opening, but then they close again. Like in our world, a lot of times, you get assignments and then something happens and then you don't get to go, right? And so in some ways, you got to look at it in retrospect. John and I both pieced together different things where, had we had that opportunity, we would have been, maybe in the middle of a bombing scenario where we could have gotten hurt, right? Or if we had gotten this assignment that we were nixed for, maybe it would be a really stressful time because a certain country has a lot of home invasions where people get hurt very badly. And so it's like you can't mourn too much about missed opportunities or lost opportunities. So for me, like at the end of the day, if nobody got hurt, nobody died, it's okay. You can do it again or, try again. So yeah, that's the role of faith for me. And I always, even with my real estate sales, it's like, I haven't really done anything. It's, I feel like the customers that I have, it's like God's brought them to me, just like opportunities at work where, yeah, I will do my best. And if somebody recognizes it and puts me on some interesting projects, that's, where did that come from, right?
Fair.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another thing that you just mentioned that I find interesting, also because it resonates with me personally. When you said you emigrated when you were 11 from Hong Kong to the US. And I often find it, and I think particularly in the US, that immigrants are often more patriotic than people who are natural born citizens, let's say that. Did you experience that while you were in high school? Were people that maybe take things for granted when you come from a colony and you go to a country where patriotism or even nationalism is obviously in everything that
well, I think that sense of, okay, so I actually, when I was going to college, I looked into doing the ROTC thing, right? I can't remember what it means, something. It's like a way to...
I know what it is, but
okay.
I don't know if our audience know what it is.
Yeah, okay. So anyway, so I thought about joining ROTC, but by the time I found out about it, it was too late to get, signatures from legislators to try. And also I heard about getting up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning to do physical exercise. And I'm like, I'm not sure I can do that, and I'm not a runner. So And after graduating from college, I graduated during a recession. I applied at a Navy recruitment center. I thought, oh, that could be kind of cool. But then they said, oh, yeah, we're going to do next. So you pass the test, but the next part, you got to go to do the physical exam when you're like going to be in some gym and kind of like, kind of be naked with everybody. I was just like, I am not sure I like that either.
Yeah.
So this was, this was my way to serve, where I can still, keep my modesty. But with the immigration thing, so growing up in a colony, it's when, this is before the 1997 takeover by China. And my dad, he was born in China and made his way through to Hong Kong during World War II. And he was in these villages after the communists had taken over, and they were having criticism meetings and things like that. And it was horrifying. And so they made their way down to Hong Kong. But my grandfather is from Zhejiang, so he spoke with an accent and he couldn't really speak Cantonese. So he was discriminated against by other Chinese people, the people who were in Hong Kong, right? Because like, you're a foreigner. And so then there's like that feeling of not being accepted, right? And then you're not really your own country. And my parents both worked for the government. They were teachers. So in Hong Kong, like in the British system, you're working for the government if you're a teacher, if you're in a public school teacher. And so they also could see, like, growing up, the different treatments, like the Brits would get and the Chinese people would get, right? So after they immigrated to the U.S., like, I remember talking to my dad after we got our citizenship and stuff like that. He was just like, this country accepted us. They wanted us. They allowed us to come. And so it was the only place where he felt like our family was accepted. And so I wasn't really like, and that wasn't really indoctrinated in my head or anything, but it's kind of like, oh, here's a country that we belong to, right? And so I went through public school systems. It's kind of like everything, except for like, when I went to university, that was a private university. But this country has done so much. And then maybe it's a little bit of buying into the idea of, freedom for everyone. And growing up during Cold War times, right? And then I also had studied Russian, and I went to the former Soviet Union in 1989, in April 1989, just before the Berlin Wall fell. That was a school trip. And a lot of my classmates that started Russian with me, they went the first year. But I wanted to pay my way, so I worked 2 summers and saved up my money and for the trip. So I went with students that were like a couple years below me, because I went my senior year, and I could see how life was so different over there. People are afraid to speak. There's curfews. It's not a comfortable place, and because growing up in Hong Kong, I didn't really experience that. Just knowing that my dad went through those meetings in those criticism meetings in mainland China, when they were making their way to Hong Kong, it's like what I heard, but not personal, right? When I went to Russia and went to the Soviet Union and saw that, it's like, okay, this is very different. And so that's where kind of we grew up Cold War time, so there's a lot of propaganda both sides, right? But when you kind of see it, you're like, it's something that, needs to be protected, like the freedoms that we have, the ideals that are available to the more democratic countries. As I grew up and consumed more news, then you can see, people have dictators. It never turns out good, right? Because it's one person's whim, and you just hope that person stays, sane. And so I think that's where it grew. Like I have these skills and could help. And I always thought public service is an honorable thing because I did come from a family of public servants. My parents being teachers, I had this desire to serve, but couldn't quite get over my fear of physical education, physical training.
Fair enough. But on the other side, when you were with the agency, did you feel ever that because of your heritage that people might look differently at you or under more scrutiny maybe?
I felt like I had to be better at what I do than other people. Okay, so I was married to another officer. So there are a lot of foreign-born people where they came into the agency because, their spouse was agency first. And then came through the same way that I was coming through where, because you bring a certain skill, right? For me, it was the language. And then sometimes people come in because there's a need for some job. And then they ended up coming in for more permanent positions. But being Asian and married to a Caucasian person, there were times when it was like really awkward because when we were living overseas, going to diplomatic functions, it's like our own people would come speak to me very slowly and clearly or loudly, thinking I don't understand English. And then when I do respond, they're like, "Oh, you speak English so well." It's like, yeah. And so there are assumptions, like when we were overseas living in this place where more well known for prostitution, it didn't matter that, my husband and I, we go down the street not holding hands. There's like no public display of affection whatsoever. And I was like pregnant half the time. If I'm with him, people would assume I'm a lady of the night. And and that was very uncomfortable. But I learned the language, but only like being able to order food and stuff. So when people saw me, they thought I was, from their country. And then when I speak, they would charge me more than the locals, and actually charge me double what they would charge my husband. And one time I remember I had just given birth to my son, and my dad had gone to help me because he's a good cook. He was like cooking me all kinds of stuff. And I felt bad that he didn't really get to go see some of the sights. So after I had the baby, it was probably like a week or two after I had the baby, I took him up to this really cool scenic spot where you can have a panoramic view of the city. And there was a local policeman at the top. He was like just sneering at me because he thought I was a local lady, but we're walking with my dad, and my dad didn't want me to fall down. Like we had to climb like 200 steps to get to the top. So he was kind of holding me by the elbow, making sure I don't fall, right? And my dad's old. So he just assumed that I was some mistress until I got to the top. And I said, "Oh," and I asked, can you tell me where the bathroom is? And I was speaking the local language. And then he realized I'm not a local person. So then he was all friendly and nice. But that's the kind of things where when you're out, living, it's like that. And so inside the agency, I felt sometimes, it's never verbalized to me, but I felt like I need to earn my stripes. Like people need to know that I am in the position I'm in because of my abilities, not because of who I'm married to. So I did feel that, and it was not verbalized, but maybe sometimes the way people look at me. So I was very, very careful. There were for a while there, for several years, my husband and I, we worked right down the hall from each other, but nobody ever knew that we were married to each other except for the bosses or something. They knew. But one day somebody came into my office and he saw my name tag and he's like, "Oh, you have the same last name as this other guy down the hall." I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's my husband." It's like, and we had been working together. This person that came in, we had been working together for more than a year. He had no idea. So I So I tried very hard to make sure that what he did and how he performed would not impact on me and how I perform, and vice versa. That was really important to me, that because sometimes it's easy for people to make assumptions because you're husband and wife, right? But I wanted it to make sure that separated in people's minds. Yeah. Very, very rarely go to lunch together. And when we do, we go to a special dining room where it's like a restaurant. We would never, well, not never, but we rarely eat in the cafeteria together. I'm usually eating in the cafeteria and having Starbucks with my friends, but but not with him.
Fair enough.
In terms of the discrimination, I feel that in the agency, it's quite fair. It has been, my experience is that it has been quite fair. Yeah, maybe different times it wasn't quite like that. But in terms of the racial component of, having opportunities.
For people that, I know a lot of people that listen to this podcast, because I think it's the way we speak about the job and about intelligence is very sober. And it is what it is in that sense. And we don't do really any hyperbole. I mean, I don't. I'm not very interested in that. But a lot of people, they listen, I think, for advice. There's a lot of young people that listen and people that want to have a career in intelligence. What advice would you give them?
I would say that being an intelligence officer, so like if you want to contribute, right? And it's very hard. Well, okay, so being a operationally trained officer is not the easiest path, okay? Because there are a lot of, you can be a smart person, but maybe you can't handle stress. And you may wash out of training. And it's that the end of your world. No, because there's so many roles where you can play an important part in making things happen. Yeah, you may not be the person sitting across from that important asset, but you could be the person making things happen so that is possible at all. And so I think if somebody really wants to be part of that world, number one, stay clean and sober and just, live your life right in terms of, be honest with yourself, have self-awareness, and don't lose heart, right? Because when one role is not possible, that's not the end of it. There are other roles and other organizations that still, where you can still make a difference. I think part of it is, what's in your heart, right? If you really want to help your country, really want to serve your country, if that's the motivation, there are many, many different ways of doing that. Yeah. But if you're in it for the glory because you think, that's like being Jason Bourne kicking down doors and it's so cool, maybe, I may get girls interested in me or, that kind of like thing, right? Then maybe this is not really for you because that's not the world. Yeah. And there are moments where that what you're doing is like, it really has made a difference, but it is hard work. And nobody's going to be filming you, but hopefully when you're doing these things,
if you do it right,
you do it right. Yeah. And so, it's got to be like whatever satisfaction you get out of it, you need to, if it's going to be like for you, if it's internal and you're satisfied, that, oh yeah, I tried my best to like help with this, or I try my best to like do this and do this right. And if that's like, that gives you your sense of, hey, this is great. I did a good job today. So that would be fine. But if you need the external glory, right? Again, maybe not so good. That's not the path that would be helpful to you or your nation. Yeah. So I think, just persevere and find different, and it's important too, I think, once you get in to be, especially when you're encountering situations that is troubling to you, have mentors and have friends who can guide you through, right? Who can help you navigate. Or if you have trouble, seeing what choices you may have, go talk to someone. You don't have to go internalize everything, like a trusted boss or somebody that you respect, or if they're like some big mentoring program that the organization offers, take advantage of it and make sure that you paired up with a person who really has your best interest at heart. So like for us, when we were during our career, we were told, oh, hey, make your 5-year plan. Like, where do you want to be in the next 5 years? Like, kind of like, what's your dream job, right? And then you can find people but then you can't just keep that a secret, because nobody can help you if you keep it a secret, right? But if you think, okay, I'm interested in exploring this job. This is the job that I would really feel like I could contribute, that would be very satisfying to me. Then you don't keep it to yourself and make it a fantasy in your head, right? Oh, I could do this. You got to talk to somebody who can maybe say, okay, maybe that's not the job. Maybe tell your mentor, oh, hey, this is the kind of job I think I want. Like, how do I go about, like, what is it like? I'm not really sure, can I talk to someone? And then they can maybe point you in the right direction, right? Because it's a human business. It's networking. And even doing your work outside, it's also networking, right? So this way you can meet people who may be able to tell you more about the job you think you're interested in. And then and maybe after hearing about it, maybe you decide, maybe I don't really want that job, right? Because sometimes you just don't know, right? And there are also jobs where you can do it for a period of time, but not forever. So you kind of got to be realistic and know all that too. So, like there are age limits for getting into different tracks, maybe different career tracks. You got to be realistic about it. Just kind of like, oh, you want to serve the country, you want to join the military, but you're 40. Well, I don't know if you got it, but the cutoff may be like 30, right? For the military, it's like, well, you're not going to be able to go be a soldier, but maybe there are other things that they can still hire you for. Maybe you can help them with logistics, get the food and get the, medicine that they need to help them. So I think if you can connect your motivation with your dream of helping, right, in some role, if the motivation is good, you'll find a way that is good. Yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, because I had a conversation with somebody that will hear this. So it will get back to me when he hears this, that I said, like, don't aspire for a job just because you think it's cool. And that's fine, but let that not be the only motivation why you go for it, because that won't really last, especially when reality hits. And I think also, as you mentioned, a lot of people over-glamorize operations roles, and they don't understand the sacrifices and the impact it has on you on all fronts. And I think if they would know, I don't think they would have aspired to it as much. And I've seen people that say, like, it would be a perfect role for me, and I've seen them in settings where it's like, well, in a normal setting, you cannot even make your way. How are you going to do that while you're under pressure and you're in, a hostile environment?
Yeah. And, Hollywood glamorizes everything,
yeah, some
right?
realism is good for everybody, I think.
Real life is not a movie. And even if it's a really cool job, there are parts where it's not cool, right? So, like, in order, so if you're an ops officer, in order to meet somebody, you got to do all these other things beforehand. Maybe you got to walk a long ways in uncomfortable weather, and you got like blisters on your feet. That's not glamorous, but it is necessary, right?
Yeah. I always ask at the end of the podcast for any cultural recommendations. It doesn't have to be about intelligence, but what are you watching? What are you listening to? What are you reading?
My husband and I are working through these Guy Ritchie movies right now. Just for kind of, because we appreciate, we appreciate the artistic angles that he put in. It's kind of like glamorizing things that probably shouldn't be glamorized either. But I find it fascinating because, he uses the similar types of characters. I mean, like, not characters, but he has a lineup of actors that he uses, right? And similar to the Coen brothers and Wes Anderson. So, and they're very distinctive. So in college, I was really into film. So I actually was part of a film society. And I learned to run a projector. And the funniest thing was years and years ago when Spike Lee came out with, I think, Jungle Fever or something, I was so engrossed in watching the movie, I forgot the timing dot, and all of a sudden everything went blank. And people were complaining. I was like, okay, wait. But yeah, so I think that, so we're going through some of these series, and I'm very much looking forward to Slow Horses. The next season's coming out soon in Apple TV. And we feel like that show, the first season was very plausible. Now it's becoming less plausible, but we're really enjoying the characters, And so those are the movies that we're watching. I am spending a lot of time doing translation these days, so I am not reading per se any kind of book in particular, but I am getting ready to read a book about women spies during the Revolutionary War. Yeah. Women spies during the Revolutionary War, because my husband and I will be giving a talk on it in a couple of weeks. So I think, so one of the cool things was going through the Spy Museum one year when they had a little exhibit on women spies, in history. So they had Mata Hari and Julia Child and all these people that are household names, sort of, but, kind of learning more about their lives and stuff. And there's even a Revolutionary War, during Revolutionary War times, this woman who dressed up as a man and would go on the front lines and carry reports and stuff. So it's really kind of fascinating, because I think women are a lot of times underestimated in their ability. Yeah. So whenever I ride a plane, if I don't want to talk to my seatmate, they ask me what I do. I tell them I'm a housewife, and then, and then nobody wants to speak to me.
Just the write up.
Yeah.
Fair. Esther, thank you so much for your time and for your insight. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't think we have done a podcast like this, maybe even ever, but definitely not in a long time that I remember, where somebody explained how your private life and your work life, ebbs and flows of it in that sense. And I think that's also very important for people to hear, that life still goes on, whatever project you're on, whatever operation you're on. And I really appreciate you taking the time. And,
thanks.
And,
thanks so much for having me on. And it's because we're semi-retired, and we see sometimes how people really build an identity around their job instead of their own personhood. It's really important to understand that, hey, as much cool things as you might do in this job, that does not define who you are. You gotta, and I think people who have a hard time finding themselves upon retirement, they don't know what to do with themselves. All they know is to go back to work. I think that's, but there's so much of life to enjoy out there.
From what I hear from your life, I mean, you always found ways to help others and to serve. So I don't think it's a problem for you after retirement.
Well, I have so many. I feel like I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up.
Yeah.
But I've also really appreciated I had some really fantastic women bosses who were very supportive, male bosses too. And in particular, I want to just tell you about one instance, because I have 4 kids, right? And some of them can be a little bit goofy. And so one of them apparently was getting an award and didn't tell us. And so she calls me one day, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. She says, "Oh, my teacher says I need to tell you because we have some kind of award thing for me." And so, yeah, it's going to be at the school at 2:30. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to go to a meeting. And my boss, who was also a mom, she was right behind me and heard my conversation with her. She's like, go. and I really was very glad she told me to go, because I got there and my child was graduating from 8th grade, right? Not graduating, but and she got the Drama Queen Award, and they only award that to one boy and one girl in 8th grade. So I thought, this is kind of like an important thing.
Yeah.
And so I think you find in any organization, especially big ones, right? You find your tribe of people that got your back. And that's really, it's really key. I'm not talking about nepotism or anything, but it's just kind of like my boss saying, go, we'll cover you for the rest of the day, So yeah, and the support system is out there.
Fantastic. Again, Esther, thank you so much for your time, and I hope to speak soon with you again, either on a podcast or off of it. And yeah, thank you so much. Do you want to share anywhere where people can find you if they have questions or whatever?
Well, I do have a LinkedIn profile, so they're welcome to contact me via LinkedIn. I think that would probably be the best way. Yeah.
Yeah. We will share it in the show notes too.
Okay, great. Right. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you.